Céad Míle Fáilte, Croeso Mawr, and welcome back to Clancy's Kitchen. We've a thinned down version of the kitchen today. It's myself, Roisin, Clancy and Ryland Teifi. A lot of people have been asking, what is this Welshman's connection? Although we've talked a lot in past podcasts about the connection. We're obviously a couple. We did the podcast with our kids there, podcast before the last one. And you told us a little bit about your Welsh background, but there seems to be an interest in Welsh connections to Ireland, Welsh folk music. We might start with looking, Ryland, with just let people know a little bit about Wales, the Welsh language, the Welsh culture, how it differs, throwing you in at the deep end. But let's start with the Welsh language maybe, because I know for me, when I went to Wales, I was amazed at how widely spoken the Welsh language is and how naturally spoken it is. I know in Ireland we have Gaeltacht areas and pockets of Irish-speaking areas, and we're in a Gaeltacht here in Rhine, of course. Yeah. But you grew up, you were immersed in the Welsh language from day one. Tell us a bit about that.
This is going to be a long podcast.
It certainly is. Go on.
Well, the first thing to know, I think, the important thing is it's my first language. So I never considered myself anything but a Welsh speaker before being Welsh even, you know. In the same way, if you're born in Italy or Spain or France or whatever, you know, it is my mother tongue. And I think that has an important resonance because it's the language you hear your mother calling you in for your supper or telling you go to bed or not being naughty, giving out to you. Yeah. So those rhythms, that's what language is, really. I think the important part of language is, you know, that essential term, the mother tongue.
Yeah.
You know, in Wales, you have great culture, poetry, history, all kinds of stuff, music. But essentially, for me, it's just what I speak. It's what I speak to the girls, for instance.
And not a lot of people realise that. I mean, when you think of Wales, I suppose for most people in terms of arts and literature, it would be Dylan Thomas would come to mind.
Yeah.
But of course, there's a wealth of Welsh language, folk songs and literature. And of course, there's the Mabinogion.
Yes.
That's kind of our equivalent a little bit to Cuchulainn or Tiernan Oak. So give us a little bit about what is the Mabinogion?
The Mabinogi or the Mabinogion are the ancient tales of Wales. And of course, you'd have similar stories in Ireland. And you look back at the old stories, there was much more, or many more connections between Wales and Ireland and intermarriages.
Do you know any offhand that connect any of the?
Well, Bendigeidfran, the giant, went over.
I remember you telling the kids these kind of stories.
There was a marriage. There was a maid match in Ireland, and it all went south anyway, you know. And there were battles ensued, and you know
the Irish probably weren't organised enough for the Welsh, was it?
The Welsh were
they're one of the differences I noticed between us, definitely.
The Welsh were there. They were supposed to be here at 9:00.
Where are they?
No, but you know, those are the ancient stories. You know, you have the oldest example of poetry in Britain. Now, when you say Britain, it means the Brythonic, the predating Saxon. You know, a lot of people equate Britain to England.
But let me just say this before you go on. Isn't Welsh the oldest language in Europe?
I've always said that. You know, there'll be some Irish historian now will phone up and send me a stinking letter or something. But just on that example, the oldest poem is that of the Gododdin from the 6th century, where, and this is when Welsh was spoken right up to Scotland. And it makes sense if you look at northern England now, you have Cumbria, which is Cymru really.
Yeah. And Cymru, for people who don't know, means Wales.
Exactly. And the Gododdin is the oldest example of poetry in Britain, written by a bard called Aneurin. And it was a poem, an epic poem, I suppose, or a war poem, where, let's say, the Welsh up near Catterick in Scotland were facing the Saxons. And an Eirin was
The
just
Saxons being the English.
Yes, an Eirin would be the poet documenting the battle. But sure, didn't they see, that's very Irish, didn't they see that they were outnumbered by the Saxons?
Right.
And they said, what are we going to do? There's a big battle coming now, and look at the numbers over there. But what did they do? Very Welsh. The night before, they started drinking mead. And then they got a bit cocky.
And we have that in. I mean, it's interesting. There are certain words that are similar between the Gaelic Irish and the Welsh, and mead would be one of them. That's a drink for people who don't know. It's like honey and sort of
something strong,
or
anyway.
whiskey and honey. Or
well, it was
like
strong enough the night before for them to get some Dutch courage, because they decided, come on, we'll take them on anyway. And they were massacred.
I thought you were going to give
the mother of
real
all
brave
hangovers.
story that they won the battle.
And the only one remaining was poor Eiring. I'd say he was behind a tree going. And there's this, if you're a Welsh speaker, you can understand, but it's old Welsh.
Yeah.
So that's
he
history.
lived. He was the only one who lived to tell the tale. And of course, Cornwall. And I remember when we were in Brittany a number of years back. The similarities between the Breton language and the Welsh language and Cornish as well, right, is very similar.
You have a lot of prefixes to names of places like Pen something, the head of, headland or Pont, Pont Avant,
bridge,
or Pont Aven
in
Brittany, which is Pont, quite simply, over Aven, which is Avon in Welsh.
River,
bridge over the river,
Yeah.
So that's the Celtic strain of languages. But you see, there was so much literary culture that came from Wales in the Middle Ages. David ap Gwilym, for instance, who was famous for his love poetry, would be known across Europe.
Yeah.
But I suppose today the challenge for us in Wales is the language is probably one of our foremost symbols of our identity. Well, for us, for me anyway. But that doesn't sell it worldwide. If you think of Ireland...
No, and it's interesting because across...
music...
but when I was in the States, I met, obviously loads and loads of Irish people, English, Scottish, not so many Welsh, interestingly.
No, we
and I know that back through history, because I remember you played a part and we had a picture of you and our daughter Laurie when she was a little baby, dressed up in what century was it? You were playing the role of...
Oh, that's going back now. Again, the myth of Taliesin, so it's the early days of
No, I'm talking about the Quakers now.
Oh, that would be...
You were playing the role of who?
Roland Ellis.
Roland Ellis.
During the Methodist
There was a famous...
revival and, they were persecuted and they went to places like Pennsylvania. And Roland Ellis, a landowner from Dolgellau in Wales, went there. And there's an actual college called the Roland Ellis College now in Pennsylvania. And there's a village called Bryn Mawr, because that was the name of the farm in Dolgellau.
Yes.
And I've met an American.
Yes, we know him
said,
well.
I'm from Bryn Mawr.
Yeah, which is Bryn Mawr, which means big hill.
Big hill, yeah. Well, in Dolgellau, for instance, it sits underneath the beautiful mountain of Cader Idris's chair.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how these things, transpired.
And, of course, you've got Patagonia.
Yeah.
And there's Welsh speakers in Patagonia, right?
That's true. And again, that was people going over to find a new world. The examples aren't as numerous and vast as the Irish, because you had the famine and stuff. It was, en masse.
Yeah.
But, you still now today in the Wladva, the small country as it's called, in Patagonia, you have people speaking and singing in Welsh. But what's amazing... It's like hearing someone speaking Welsh with a Spanish accent.
That's incredible, isn't it?
I've never gone there before, and it's on the bucket list for sure.
No, I'd love to. So you mentioned singing there, and of course, Welsh being your first language, you learnt English, I guess, when you went to school. And
it wasn't as if we didn't have television or anything. Your first language would be Welsh, but being in such close proximity to England and to Anglo-American culture on television, you'd be speaking English quickly. Now, if you're talking about my great grandparents, generation, people were slower to learn English,
Yes.
and because communities were more isolated then.
Of course.
And of course, the Welsh language was stronger, but it does remain the strongest Celtic language. It's about 20% of people who speak it, and the Welsh government have set a target of getting 1 million speakers.
Wow, you put us to shame in Ireland. What percentage of Irish people speak Irish?
I don't know, but you see, history, the Bible was translated into Welsh.
Yes. And
So
that
that was a big
really
thing.
helped to save the language.
By
didn't it?
William Morgan.
Yes.
And that essentially was a game changer.
Yeah.
Because, you see, Wales used to be Catholic. And then, of course, Henry VIII.
Henry VIII,
Henry
wasn't
VIII
it?
and
Yeah.
all that nonsense
wanted
came
to
along.
marry a non-Catholic.
Yeah,
so
but
that
people
did away
think
with
then,
that.
I suppose, Wales is a
And
Protestant
Boleyn.
country, and you have the Church of Wales and the Anglican Church. But during the Methodist revival, the Welsh sort of moved towards that sort of religion, more of a radical, non-conformist. And that's why you have the chapels, very simple form of religion without the pomp.
Yeah.
So I never think of it in those terms.
Yeah.
I think of it, that's a Welsh sort of religion.
And I remember, the years we lived in Wales, and you'd go to any event in a chapel, be it wedding or funeral or what's your equivalent to mass? You'd say service, Sunday service or whatever.
Yeah.
And the Welsh would, I think when we sing at mass, we're kind of almost timid about it.
Yeah.
And whereas in Wales, when people sang in the chapel, my God, they'd lift the roof off with the singing.
I think it's a form of release. I really
Yeah.
do, because a lot of the Welsh hymns, Arglwydd dyma fi ar dy alwadi, golchi fy naid yn y gwaed a gaid ar galfari. And that would be sung out. That's a hymn called Gwahoddiad. Now,
Which means, Gwahoddiad,
to invite you.
invite you.
And a lot of the hymns of William Williams, Pantycelyn and Angriff are very passionate sort of songs.
Yes.
And they belong to the people. And I suppose that's why hymns took over from our folk culture in many ways.
And that's what struck me, because when I met you and I moved to Wales, then subsequently I didn't understand the words at first. I mean, in time I started learning a little bit, but the passion.
Yeah.
When people sang, you felt it. It was really strong.
I personally think, you see, you have it in Ireland through the music. You do sing, and there's great singers, no doubt.
But
music,
trad,
when you first hear trad music, when you first go to a session here in Ireland, you go, the power of it. And it's like some kind of release. This is us. Because both countries have been under some kind of oppression now in our history. So you think about it, when can you let that go? And I think it's through the singing in Wales. There's an interesting, I just thought of a story there. When I used to play in a band called Mendocino with Evan Grace and Hugh O'Carroll, we went over to do a festival in Wales, in Dolgellau actually. And it was a lovely afternoon, and we were outside my parents' house rehearsing. And I think we had a few other instrumentalists with us. There must be 4 or 5 of us. And in that early or late morning, a bus pulled up, and it was at least half the male voice choir where my father used to go to attend called Mabinogion Blyden Porth. They'd been to some service, and my father hadn't gone, so they'd call in to see him on the way back. So they just filed out into the garden, and a cup of tea was given out and all the rest of it. And they saw the banjos and the instruments. And one of the lads said, "Could you play Fields of Athenry?" And Evan just started on the tune, and we started playing it. And then they sang.
As a choir.
And it was the first time I think I'd ever saw a Welsh choir and a 5-piece Irish band play like that. So you had the passion of the music and that great,
wow,
sense of singing on top of it. And
there's a show in there somewhere, isn't there?
There is. I'd love to do that one day.
When I met you, it was at the Dublin Theatre Festival. And you actually won the festival that year. You had a lovely show, Taliesin.
That's right, yeah.
And it was a fabulous show. And I remember there was a gathering afterwards, I think it was Dublin Castle.
Yeah.
And you started singing a folk song in Welsh.
God, your memory's better than mine.
And you've sang it a lot since. You sang it with your dad, actually. We have a picture of him.
Yeah, I seldom sang it, actually, because I always considered it my father's song.
But that's reminded me, the passion, that was my introduction to you, more or less, was you singing this beautiful folk song. It's almost like the equivalent of Go Lassie Go or
And the themes are quite similar, actually. It's become sort of our Go Lassie Go, in Wales at home, until my father passed anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's, I'm not sure if the source is known, because it was passed on the oral tradition, but I've heard it's sort of a song in keeping with the 19th century style. And typically in theme, it talks about a sick maiden longing for the summer so she can get better.
Yeah.
A bit like Go Lassie Go.
Yeah.
The summertime is coming and the trees are sweetly blooming.
Yes.
It's always that thing that
Hiraeth is a beautiful Welsh word.
Yeah.
Hiraeth, I remember that, is a longing.
Yeah, Hiraeth is a word we always like to say in Wales that it's unique. Because it's like longing, but it's more than that.
It's like homesickness.
It's like a pot of longing, but all your background, all the people you know, all the people you've loved, all the songs you've known and everything in with it.
Right.
Because it means literally, here aith, long it is gone.
Oh.
So it's not missing someone alone.
Yeah.
When I miss you,
Yeah.
I miss everything.
Oh.
Your background, your poems, your songs, and don't cry now.
Oh, I will. I'm nearly on the verge of tears. So put that Hiraeth. Go on, give us a blast of
Can
it.
I
Put the
just say,
Hiraeth
though,
into it.
Because I didn't have much time to think about this, but last week I lost a dear friend, and he was a legend in Wales. God.
Dowie Puss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that again.
Well, why don't you dedicate this to Dowie? No, I think it's lovely.
No, I got to say this because it only hit me. Dewi Puss was a legend in Wales, and he was the closest I ever met in Wales to what you'd call in Ireland the Shanachie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I performed with him over the years, and he was the closest person I'd met in Wales to your father. Because both had, Bobby Clancy and Dewi Puss had this ability. Actors alone don't have it, singers alone don't have it, musicians alone don't have it. But where they can walk into a room and change the whole feel, the ethos, the dynamic, the psychology. Dewi could walk into a room, tell a story, sing a song. His humour, he was like Spike Milligan, really.
Yeah.
And but his way with people.
His love of people.
And
his
also,
love of life and his love of people, his love of song and the spoken word.
And also, more than that, I think people forget he's one of the greatest songwriters in modern Wales. And for me personally, as a songwriter, he's one of the greatest chorus writers. And I remember talking to him. He started off with the chorus always, and he had, remember Cakey Llwyd?
Yes.
Cakey Llwyd, rwy ti'n hart, Cakey Llwyd, rwy ti'n werth y byd I mi. Cakey Llwyd, rwy ti'n angen, Cakey Llwyd, rwy'n dy garu. Yeah, and that's just a little taste of it. But I'd probably dedicate this song to Dewi Puss Morris. He was also a great actor. There's a film from the late 70s, I think, called Grand Slam about rugby in Wales.
Yeah.
And he starred in that with the Oscar-winning Hugh Griffith and other great actors. He could do anything. But ar Ynys Glaf, I'll dedicate it to Dewi and my father, because he introduced me to this song.
Two Welsh legends. 3 including you.
Oh, stop.
Getting very Irish now, Ryland. Oh, stop.
Stop that now. y mae'r haf yn hir yn dyfod, meddai'r enedd fechan glaf. Pryd mae'r gwanwyn yma I ddarfod, pryd fy mam y daw'r haf. Dweud o hyd y mae'n nghyfeillion, dyma'r un hi gysur ag af. Cwyd y galon, enedurion, mi fendi di pan ddaw'r haf. Os rhyw arwydd bod hi'n cnesu, oes briallu hyd yn ant, Ody'r adar bach yn canu, mi hi gwyllt y pant. Dweud o hyd y mae'n nghyfeillion, dyma'r un hi gysur ag af. Cwyd y galon, enedurion, mi fendi di pan ddaw'r haf. Glywod neb y gogeleni ar hen dderwen fawr y ddo, ond I hon o ddechrau canu, haws fi gwenu ar ei hôn. Dweud o hyd y mae'n nghyfeillion, dyma'r un hi gysur ag af. Cwyd y galon, enedurion, mi fendi di pan ddaw'r haf. Mi fendi di pan ddaw'r haf.
Hyfryd. Hi everyone, we really hope you're enjoying listening or watching Clancy's Kitchen, the podcast. To enable us to continue making more content, please look at our website www.clancyskitchen.com, where you will be able to donate to Patreon or Ko-fi. It would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. Dewi pus a Garnon. Garnon, your dad, of course, was one, well, God, he was many things, folk singer, but also organiser of the Canaan Festival.
And my father was, as you know, there's a picture there of him, a large man.
Yes.
He was in an Eisteddfod once in Cardigan, and they came off the stage with the choir, and this old woman was sitting in the front row, and she turned to a friend and said, "That fella there's a choir on his own, man."
And he was too. But he was a great oomph about him, didn't he? Do you know, he really got things done.
If they were organising a concert or the festival, as we might get to, you know, people couldn't say no to him.
No.
He'd be on the phone. "Have you sold the tickets now? Did you do this? Did you do that? Okay, Garnon."
Yeah.
And they, you know, he got things done all right. Yeah.
And he was very much behind your singing and playing. Didn't he, when you were a little lad, you had, was it your preacher who kind of taught you how to play mandolin or to sing?
No, there were so many different, you know, you don't realise how blessed you were. there was an Englishman in Talgareg who learnt Welsh, and he was quite a staunch socialist.
Yeah.
I remember Derry Smith, he taught me the mandolin. Excuse me. And then you had people like Elfed Lewis.
That was your preacher.
In many ways, the most unconventional preacher. Preachers usually had black ties and dandruff on their black suits and all of that, and quite stuffy, right? Elfed had pink ties, platform shoes, long hair, and he was also a folk singer,
Yeah.
And he taught me all these songs when I was a kid,
Yeah.
So I did from all kinds of directions. But my father and mother, and my father especially, loved all kinds of folk and traditional music. And we'd sit down and watch. There was a series on BBC on the chieftains every week. So we'd sit religiously. And during that same time, you see, there was a kind of revival from the late 70s into the 80s of Welsh groups.
Yeah.
Because you'd had the Clancys and the Dubliners and all the rest of them in Ireland. Arlog, who have spent time here in Ring.
They have. There's
many
a picture
nights in
Moody's. The local pub.
I used to see them when I was a kid. Then Hunters, what a great band from South Wales. And Plethin with the three-part harmony inspired by the Plygain tradition of Mid Wales.
So as we said, we met in the Dublin Theatre Festival. And I remember sometime there afterwards, you invited me over to a festival in your village in West Wales. And it was the Canaan Festival, which your parents were actually instrumental in setting up, right? They were on the committee and your parents were very much behind. Tell us a little bit about the Canaan Festival.
Well, it was my father and 5 others, and then a myriad of people then joined the committee. But this idea of creating a folk festival, as I said before, the love of Irish music, Scottish music and Welsh, and this advent of and becoming of new Welsh folk music with Arlog, Huntus, Plethin, Buchadanas. There was so many new groups, and I grew up with them and edited them, and of course Mike Stevens, the great songwriter, and David Iwan, our foremost protest singer. So that was the fabric, the tapestry of stuff around. So they started the festival, and it became so big soon enough, and they had to go from a leisure centre to a shed to a big top that held 5,000 to 10,000 people in the end,
And there were, I remember there were a few stories around the Irish acts that came over, the Furies, the Dubliners, and Dada, was it? And Danu, and a lot of them. Was there a story around, was it the Dubliners or the Furies that were staying with? Tell us a little bit about that.
So many stories, because we had the shop right in the post office right in the middle of the village.
Shop a Pentre,
and it became like the hub, the office or the ticket office.
Yes.
From July, just people in all the time buying tickets. And of course, during the festival, you could bump into the Furies, or I remember going into the lounge one Saturday afternoon and David Spillane, the piper, was there eating loads of oranges and watching the Wimbledon final. So I sat with him in the afternoon. I remember clear as day, he was watching Boris Becker versus Ivan Lendl. And we both supported Ivan Lendl, which is great.
So you must have been the underdog or something at the time they were expecting Becker to win.
We always thought Boris Becker was a bit arrogant or whatever. Anyway, and so you would have these people in and out and of the house. It was, you couldn't make it up.
Yeah. And the Dubliners, did they stayed locally or something? What was the story with the Dubliners?
Some great pubs in West Wales. The pub in Fostrassel was rammed during the festival weekend. But the Dubliners
That's
always...
the Fostrassel Arms.
The Fostrassel Arms. But the Dubliners always chose to go back to the same place. And that's a quiet country pub where they stayed with Hefin and Megan in Talgareg, the Glanarafon Arms. And they went there because they had a great welcome. It was a bit off the beaten track, far from the madding crowd of the festival.
And they were probably well looked after, were they?
You've got it. You see, they'd have their Welsh breakfast, dinner, lunch, tea, a few pints in the afternoon. And then Megan would take their trousers and shirts and iron them for them before they went on stage in the Canaan. I would love to have seen that, and seen Ronnie Drew and the lads just be going through that experience.
And didn't they as well? They gave back to the community, right?
You're right. Yeah, you know the story already. Yeah. But one Cnapan weekend, there was an afternoon tea, I think, with the Welsh Women's Association.
Merched y Wawr.
Merched y Wawr.
Which would be like the Country Women's Association. Or
That's right. Yeah. And it was in the village hall. And the Dubliners heard of this and they decided to go up and give them a little private concert, little session.
Did they ask them to iron their trousers before they left?
There wasn't an iron.
Or knit them a jumper.
There wasn't an iron cold that weekend. So it was just that time, And it was fabulous for us because we'd heard a lot about these legends of Celtic and music, but to see them on the same stage as some of our Welsh heroes, Aralog, as I said, at Hunters and whatnot.
And I remember seeing footage of that. You were like, at this point, you were a teenager, I think. I remember seeing some footage of yourself and some others playing. There was a song, it's gone around to my head as you're talking there. Backen dinka da dee da.
Yeah, it's quite rhythmical, isn't it? Backen bach o dinka.
For me, I associate that with the Canaan Festival somehow. Yeah, tell us a bit about that.
Well, you probably heard me.
And I know the kids, our kids sang it, yes.
Because essentially I loved the track when it was recorded by the Juntos. But the story of the song is, I think it was first heard in oral tradition in recent times in North Wales, although I think the melody also has a connection to Mabinogion, where I'm from. And it's about the traveller. But then he was called the Tinker, which today unfortunately has some derogatory connotation.
It has, but it actually came from Tinker tins. They, as part of their trade, they would what's the term? Smelled. What's the term?
And form like cups and
tins,
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, that's where it came from.
And this song
right?
sort of celebrates that. It talks about the craftsmanship of making something of nothing.
Yeah.
And it's a nice song because at the end, the communities would always say, "Mana golled ar ei ôl." We miss them when they go because they gave to us and through their craftsmanship. And so that's the song. I think it was heard by Ivan O'Williams in North Wales, probably around the 40s, I think, and then passed on to Dr. Meredith Evans, himself and Phyllis Kinney, his wife, collected songs.
No, is that the Meredith Evans who knew my uncle Tom Clancy?
Well, that is the story. I've heard it told by a friend of our family.
So they must have known each other through
acting told me.
Through literature?
See, Mered, as he was known, another Welsh legend, folk collector, but he was also an academic and writer and philosopher. Dr. Meredith Evans went to the States and, of course, kindred spirits, met the Clancys, and I think became friends with Tom especially.
Yeah.
Because it was that time of the folk explosion.
I would say, and Tom, of course, had played, was it Captain Cat he played from Under Milkwood, or?
Yeah, and there's always been that affinity with the Clancys.
On Broadway, so I'd say that was the connection.
Because, Liam sang Bugeilio'r Gwenith Gwyn to me at Dublin Moonies years ago. And of course, you're right, Tom played Captain Cat, the seminal role in Under Milkwood on Broadway.
Yes.
And they all knew Dylan Thomas
from the White Horse Tavern.
Of course. Well, they wouldn't know him because he passed, didn't he? But they knew of his poetry. Yes. Yeah. And they knew more of his poetry than I would.
Wow.
Yeah.
So getting back to the song, could you give us a taste of it?
Yeah. The thing is, the story behind it is really interesting because it was heard, I think, in the 40s by Ivan O'Williams, and then Mered took it on and documented it there. But I think there's a story that a young boy in school heard the song, the Knickerbocker Line, which I'm not sure is Australian as a song, or is it connected to the Knickerbocker Line, which was in New York, between Brooklyn and Manhattan.
That was
became a
called the
tram.
Knickerbocker Line. Why, I wonder?
Well, these songs would travel, wouldn't they, in those days?
But I wonder why that stretch was called the Knickerbocker Line.
I think it was a family called the Knickerbocker family who built a lot. I think they built the Brooklyn Bridge. And if you think about the basketball team in New York today, they call it the Knicks.
Yes.
So those are the connections. I'd like to know why this boy was singing it. But the point of it maybe was pushed on him to sing an English song, but because he was a Welsh speaker,
yes,
he couldn't get it.
Because there was that period, English. Wasn't there, that you weren't allowed to speak well. They tried to sort of get rid of the Welsh language through children
in schools and with the Welsh not, etc. But what's interesting, this chorus is a mishmash of Welsh, English, diddling and talking, almost nonsense.
Through this boy.
That's what I think I've heard.
Wow.
That was it.
He was a little rebel.
But the point of the whole thing is, I didn't know that when I heard the track for the first time. What struck me was the Hunters and Greg Lynn and Mike Leese, the fiddler, and the arrangement. And
now, Greg Lynn was a lawyer, right? A barrister?
Yeah, this is it. He was wearing clogs, a folk singer. You'd think of it when you saw him.
Clog-bearing lawyer.
Yeah, and I think he actually
only in Wales.
He defended the. Might be wrong here, but I think he defended the miners during the miners' strike. So he's a man of great
socialist sort of leanings and
human
heart.
rights, and so I think hearing that for the first time was a modern folk trad-y take on this song, and I loved when I heard that. So that's why it made a mark or an impression on me, and I think that's why the girls, I've played it over the years and I love it.
Yeah, it's got a nice beat.
So it's not the Mike Leese Greg Lynn version.
I got my tambourine here somewhere.
All right, so we'll give it a go and we try it. So it's Bachgen Bach o Dinker. Bachgen Bach o Dinker, y myned hyd o wlad. Cario dŵls a'i dacla, gwneud ei waith yn rhad. Yn ei lawr oedd hei arna, ar ei gefn bocs, pwt o gytyn yn ei geg. A fan ei drwy'n rydlocs, a boes ar twig around again. A potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker lane. La-di-da-di-da, di-hocket ar y train. A potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker lane. Jo yn y badell y pisser neu'r ystyn. Taro'r heiarn yn y tan, dal i sgwrsio'n glen. Istedd yn y gornel hun, gos ar draws y llall, teimlu'r sod o'r gloi i'w glan. Gowrau'n guddio'r gwall, o boes a twig around again. Y potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. La-di-da-di-da, di-hocket ar y train. Potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. Oli hwnna carall ble raeth y tinker mwyn, gyda'i becyn ar ei gefn, a getyn dan ei drwyn. Bachgen bach o dinker ni welir yn y wlad, ond mae'n golled ar ei ôl. I wneud ei waith yn rhad, a boes a twig around again. A potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. La-di-da-di-da, di-hocket ar y train. A potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. Potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. Hey, potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. Hey, potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. Hey, potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. Oh, potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. Hey, potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. Hey, potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. Hey, potshar ar y paper ar y knickerbocker line. Oh, boys, our twig ar ounce again. A puncher ar a paper ar a knickerbocker line. La-di-da-di-da, dee hocket ar a train. A puncher ar a paper ar a knickerbocker line. Great song, isn't it?
Fabulous. Well, we were talking there about your dad more so, and well, your parents and their involvement with the Canaan Festival. But of course, your mother's side of the family is very musical as well. And you are kind of related to rock and roll royalty, aren't you really? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, often people think, make the connection or the association with my father when they think music. But before I go on to that, my mother's grandfather, my great-grandfather, a man called Tom Thomas from Llandyfriog, was one of the great craftsmen who used to make these bardic chairs. And many of Wales' foremost poets have these chairs, haven't won them.
Yeah, explain that a little bit to us. What was the idea behind that? So the poets would win the chair if they won. Was that the idea?
I think I spoke of this, and I got it wrong a few podcasts ago.
All right, so get it right now
I
this
said
time.
It was a co-ed, but they write what they call an awdl, and then it's the main competition in the Eisteddfod, the competition where there's singing and recitation and everything. But the main poet wins a sort of bardic chair. And my great-grandfather used to make them, right?
So he would craft these chairs specifically for the winner of the Eisteddfod for this competition.
And people like T.Ll Jones and Dick Jones had won my great-grandfather's chairs. But he also conducted choirs and bands. And I think that was passed on then. And what you were alluding to, my mother's first cousin was the late Ray Thomas in the seminal rock group, the Moody Blues.
Moody Blues.
Yeah. And Ray, another fantastic...
They were huge, the Moody Blues.
Yeah. I remember going to see them when I was late teens.
Nights in white satin.
That's it, yeah. And Ray played the flute, you see, and my great-grandfather gave him a flute. So it's all connected. And
but Ray, he didn't grow up in Wales.
No, he grew up in Birmingham.
Right.
And yet he had this burning love, romance for Wales. When I went up to meet him at his 70th birthday party, he knew more about our family than I did.
Wow.
He was telling me
his father
stories.
then was Welsh, so his father was...
His name was originally Morlais, but they called him Tom in Birmingham.
Because they couldn't say Morlais.
Yeah.
It was just too Welsh.
But Ray, and I think in his writing, there's a real deep Celtic resonance. And incidentally, he was great friends with Fimba Fury,
Yes, that's right.
And I haven't seen Fimba.
You don't know how that came about, no?
I'm dying to meet Fimba to see and ask him about
Because
that.
you spent some time with Ray, didn't you, in his home in London, outside London, right?
Yeah, and when I met him again, I'd met him when I was younger, and I met him fairly recently, and I thought, gosh, he's just like one of us. And he had West Wales just coursing through his veins. It's just his way.
Yeah.
But I think in the way he wrote as well, he wrote that Moody Blues song, Legend of a Mind, about Timothy Leary, the Harvard...
Timothy Leary is dead.
That's it.
Yes.
And he was a Harvard professor.
He wrote that, did he?
Yeah. Timothy Leary was a Harvard professor who was experimenting in hallucinogenics, you see. So the lyrics about Timothy Leary's dead, but he's not. He's looking... from the outside looking in, the dimensions are changing. Yeah. But I think there's a real, they were known as being exponents of prog rock and all the rest of it, but I can hear so much Celtic stuff. There's a song that Ray has, Celtic Sonnet, and it's very hymnal and Celtic at the same time. And if you think of Timothy Leary, there's a little, let's see with the mandolin here, there's a little break in the middle. And it goes, and I thought, God, that could be a reel or a tune. It goes something.
And Ray came up with this, did he?
I never asked him, but I always thought that little lick in the middle of Timothy Leary.
It sounds Celtic.
Oh, no, hold on. It goes something like...
Oh, yeah, very Celtic sounding. I'd say that was Ray right enough.
Oh,
yeah.
And I often wondered where that came from. And I think he just had it.
Yes.
And you asked there, I spent time with him. I was very fortunate. I was doing a play in London.
Yeah.
And I went to stay with him, Ray and Lee.
Yes.
I was fortunate enough to stay with Ray and spend some time with him and Lee, his wife. And it was after his 70th birthday that we said we should write a song together. And that song should be about my great-grandfather, Tom Thomas, who was his grandfather. And the name we gave Tom Thomas was Dada.
That's what you called him in the family, Dada.
And he was a character.
Yeah, what can you tell us about Tom Thomas?
Well, from
other than
West Wales,
crafting these beautiful chairs, what kind of a man was he?
Well, great craftsman, character, from West Wales, but the family went down to the industrial areas and the mines to work. And Ray would be telling me these things, that he was apparently a bit of a pit boxer. Right? They'd be fighting on, in rings, very, not unruly. But he was quite handy with his hands, apparently. There's a great story about this. When they went back to West Wales, on the square in Newcastle Emlyn, there was a crowd of retrobates, let's say. And every afternoon when Tom Thomas and his son Morlais would be coming home, there was a bully or two trying to pick on Tom. And he would turn to his son and say, don't ever fight on the street like this. Walk away, walk away. But every day, every single day, this man tried to pick on him.
Because he knew he was a fighter.
And but I don't know, and he was older, and he was going home and he had his pipe in his mouth. And one day the guy sort of cornered him and he said, well, okay. He told, hold my hat or whatever to his son. And he didn't raise his fists. He just dodged him. And the guy was trying to hit it and he couldn't touch him, But he did land a hit on his pipe. And the pipe went into his mouth and scraped the mouth of his, of his mouth. The roof of his mouth, sorry. And was very painful. Anyway, they went home and they walked in and Mama was there making the dinner.
Wife.
Yeah. And she came over with a roasting hot,
scalding
cup of tea.
Oh, no.
And he drank the whole tea and he didn't say a word and he just kept an eye on his son as if to say, don't say anything. And those are the stories that Ray would come out with, and I'd never heard that.
Yeah. And wasn't it lovely that you got to spend that time with your cousin Ray Thomas of the Moody Blues? It was like a few years before he died, really. You just got to know him well.
And it's like a brotherhood, shorthand, you knew immediately that he was related. He was one of us.
Yeah.
And the stories of Wales he had, I'll do another quick one. When Dada died, there was a huge funeral in West Wales and this massive chapel was rammed, packed with people. And Ray had come down from London for the funeral and he brought, I don't remember who it was, but an American producer from LA with him, who was staying with him. And anyway, the funeral started and the singing ensued and the place was just, the roof was
I can imagine
flying
raised,
off the place, right? Raised off the chapel. And the American turned to Ray and he said, man, who brought the choir? And Ray just turned with him with pride. He said, that's no choir, that's Wales.
Oh. So a man who was brought up in Birmingham but of Welsh, he was a true Celt, wasn't he?
God.
A true Celt.
And then to be friends with people like Finbar Fury, that's really interesting.
Yes.
I can't wait to meet
Finbar Fury on one side and then the Beatles on the other. I remember because we were fortunate enough, we did our Clancy's Kitchen show in Nell's Kitchen, wasn't it? In London at one point?
Yeah, Nell's. Yeah.
Nell's Kitchen. And Ray had passed shortly before this. And his widow, Lee, was very kind and brought us back and we stayed there for a couple of nights.
Yeah.
And I remember her showing us pictures of of the Moody Blues with the Beatles and all kinds of stories. But
I'd love to ask him a few questions now because I've listened to some of these songs since.
yeah,
And I hear all these influences,
Yes.
and it's probably me, but I'm thinking I can hear that. That's so.
oh,
Welsh, that melody,
I'm sure the Celtic spirit sort
You
of
see,
shine
the one
through.
thing
in
we
them.
did do, and we were very fortunate that we could do it.
You
was
wrote a song together.
after the 70th birthday. He said we'll have to write a song together, and
Yes.
it'll have to be about Dada.
yeah.
And my great-grandfather Dada used to drink in a pub in Newcastle Emlyn called the Red Cow.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the Red Lion.
No, it's the Red Cow. Or how they say it. How do they say it in West Wales? The Red Cow.
The Red Cow.
The Red Cow. And so Ray would send me an email or post me something with just snippets of words and imagery, and a lot of them very Emlyn Williams, The Corn is Green, or
Yes.
Bible Black Clouds, the Dylan-esque sort of imagery. And I was upstairs here on the guitar, and I was just piecing these images together and trying to formulate some kind of pattern in a song and playing around with the guitar. And then we ended up, between us, myself here and Ray in London, getting a song together. And then we recorded it
Yeah.
with a great producer called Greg Walsh.
Yeah. And a lovely video.
Yeah, Greg,
beautiful
worked with Tina Turner, Pink Floyd, but what a gentleman. And here's the thing, he told me his grandmother's from Waterford,
Walsh, of course. It's very Waterford
But a
name.
gentleman,
Yeah.
and what a engineer and producer.
Yes.
It was such an experience.
Yeah. So the song is called Dada, is that right?
Dada's song, yeah.
Dada's song, because it's your great grandfather
My great-grandfather.
and Ray's grandfather,
grandfather.
Dada, known as Dada.
And we
Yeah.
wrote it, as if we were to meet him again
Yes.
and make it 3 in the Red Cow
Yes.
Inn.
And
But now it's
recorded
like-
by the great Greg Walsh, who had worked with the Moody Blues.
That's it.
And with a lot of other great artists.
Tina Turner, Pink Floyd,
Wow.
and a gentleman, and his grandmother's from Waterford.
Yeah, Welsh, of course, a good,
But,
good old Waterford name.
I wrote it on the guitar, and it became a very folky song when I wrote it. But I thought because of Ray's later work, maybe in Moody Blues, I'd record it on the keys.
Yeah.
So it was like... that sort of arpeggio-y style, which is, I suppose, influenced by another Welsh songwriter, Hugh Chiswell, who I
Yes.
adored growing up. But I always remembered writing it on guitar, and it became... So I'll try it on guitar, actually.
Yes. And did Ray play flute on this as well? Or
He
did
played
he just...
harmonica.
Oh, did ah.
But Greg was really clever. He brought some flute lines in, and he doubled down on certain things like vocals and backing vocals to create a sort of feeling of a choir. Because he
The
was
Welsh
into...
choir,
Yeah,
he had a
exactly.
really good ear.
But this is a
There
very
must have been the
stripped-back
Irish in
version.
him coming out.
Yeah, exactly. But here's Dada's song. I've heard where the corn is green, pit drop stories, and I've seen the Bible black clouds showing me where you've been. And I've stood at the altar and pew, sang the hymns that you sang too, sat in chairs of baths that were crafted by you. By you. Dada, hear your two boys sing. If we could a drink we'd bring, and make it 3 at the Red Cow Inn. You could spin a yarn or two, tell us stories that we never knew. The oak is old, but this branch is new. Now I'm stood, I'm looking on things that you left, some of them gone, but your music's here in my soul of song. My soul of song. Daddy, hear your 2 boys sing. If we could a drink, we'd bring and make it 3 at the Red Cow Inn. You could spin a yarn or 2 and tell us stories that we never knew. The oak is old, but this branch is new. Can you hear the ages sing? Can you hear your 2 boys say?
To the memory of Ray Thomas.
Dada and Ray.
Dada and Ray. And also to your mum, Linda, because I believe she knew Ray when she left West Wales.
She went to spend time with him.
She did. She lived with the family, didn't she?
Yeah.
So she had a close connection to her cousin Ray.
It's great, really, isn't it? You know, there's so many connections over water, over land. People have kinship, people who have things in common. People who have romance in their heart about other places that they've left, you know.
Totally.
So Ray, being in Birmingham, which is really just over the border in Wales, had this deep hankering for West Wales.
Yes, and the impact that they, as you were singing that, I was, remembering us staying with Ray's widow, Lee, and the lovely warm welcome we had. And I remember she had a jacket. There was an episode of The Simpsons, right?
Oh, yeah.
where they spoke about the Moody Blues, and the Moody Blues were supposed to be doing a concert in Springfield or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember taking pictures with this jacket they gave Ray from The Simpsons afterwards.
You know the story, don't you?
No, I can't. Not totally.
There's an episode of The Simpsons where the Moody Blues come in.
Yeah.
And they chase after Homer. Something's happened. And Ray has his flute. And he takes his dagger out of the flute and said, "Come here, fatty."
So now, did he say that in a Brummy accent or in a Welsh accent?
I give you a Welsh accent there. But isn't
it amazing? Like, and when you look back to the roots of where he came from and his father from West Wales, Tom Thomas, incredible. And I suppose that put me in mind of just how many of us have left. I mean, maybe I'm sort of influenced a little bit. I started rereading the book We Don't Know Ourselves.
Fintan O'Toole.
Fintan O'Toole.
Yeah.
And, looking at all of the Celtic nations, I suppose, but most especially the Irish and the Welsh who left and had to set up other places just to get by, just to survive.
And as I said earlier, there's examples of the Welsh leaving, but not comparable to the Irish, of course.
No. And looking at this book again, you can see how it happened. I mean, we had our independence, we had our free state, finally, everything we fought for, but very difficult to stay in the country, very difficult to find work.
History's difficult, isn't it?
Yes.
And there's so many things that are down to uncontrollable factors and coincidences and awful happenings like famines and,
and through generations, but up through the generations. So I'm thinking of, my fathers, in the 50s, and the Clancy brothers left their hometown of Carrick-on-Shore to try and seek a better living, or to make some kind of decent money in life, and
there's a sort of parallel universe there, and you think of Ray, probably going into a garage and starting a band.
Yes.
And then in the end becoming a successful. That was the time, you see.
Yes.
It's different now.
Well, you say different, and yet, I mean, my generation, I finished college in 1990, and it was, the talk then was all about leave. Where are you going? Are you going to London? Are you going to Canada? Are you going to the States? And not so much Australia then. But
I say it's
still
different.
leaving in our droves now.
I say it's different in the sense that, in the 60s, people were forming bands.
Yeah.
The Clancys were going away and singing their home songs.
Yes.
To a massive audience in America.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to replicate that in today's world.
Oh, absolutely.
But the idea of going away hasn't changed. Our daughter now is in New York, for
absolutely,
instance.
And I'm thinking of all all the people who've left, and watching this podcast now. Maybe we've had lovely messages from God all over the world, haven't we? Australia and the States and Germany and
Carrick-on-Shore.
All but beyond these shores, all over the world.
I think it's like when you go away. Remember that time in Brittany when we were in that festival, and I didn't know that the Breton anthem shared the same melody as the Welsh national anthem, and I heard it on the pipes being played in this small town. I think it was Pont-Avan or something like that, and. What's that? That's Hen Rad Van Adai. And like a radar going, I have to find this. Because hearing that melody, it's like if you were in America now and you heard Go Lassie Go, they would be so powerful.
Yeah.
Your songs of home, when you're away from home, have such a greater resonance, without a doubt.
But I'm thinking of a song you wrote on that very subject.
Yeah. Yes.
I can't remember the name of it now, but it was about leaving.
Well, you said something there earlier, and I thought, all the memories,
all the words.
That's
a gorgeous song. Would you play that for us?
Yeah, we'll close on this, shall we?
Yeah.
But here's the thing: when you think about leaving, because we left Wales to come here, but it's all the memories. And it's all the words.
Well, I left Ireland to go to the States. No, I left Ireland to go to Germany. I left Germany to come back to Ireland. I left Ireland to go to the States. I left Ireland to go the States to come back.
Have you stopped now?
Wales, back to Ireland. And that is the story of so many people.
And you see, even when you write a song which is loosely about emigration, you realise, I look back and I was thinking, that reminded me of something. And
what was your inspiration for that?
I think it was because we moved here. And we knew, like Aoife was in America, and I was thinking Christmas, she wasn't coming back that Christmas or something like that. And I thought, wow, it is difficult when you can't come home. But at the same time, you don't know this sometimes when you write stuff, that subconsciously other things are at work. And I think at the time I was listening to this, I tend to do this. If I come across a version of a song, I listen so much to it, when I do it to death, really. And I think I was listening, do you know that song, 500 Miles?
Oh, yes.
And I think that influenced the song. I'm not certain, but I'm pretty sure at the same time I was listening to a rendition of that. And it's like, if you miss the train I'm on, you will know that I am gone. You will hear the whistle blow, 500 miles. 500 miles, 500 miles, 500 miles, 500 miles. You will hear the whistle 500 miles.
Yes.
And then
also,
I thought I must have been listening to it because
yes,
there's
but
a
I
lot
think
of that in the
as
song.
well as that, like when you leave home and you go about, your day-to-day life and you're working, your family maybe, and you settle there and you can't go back now because you have a family there. But I think there was also something around that is when people are reminded of a song or they come together to sing, or certain words or a piece of literature or a poem that reminds them of home.
It's just
You're right back there then.
You're right back there.
Yeah.
Wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
And for me,
all
there
the
are
words,
so many homes,
all the songs that we sang. Go on, sing it.
Okay. We'll finish with this, shall we?
Lovely. If we remember it.
Yeah, I haven't sang this for a while.
And I'm thinking of my auntie in Australia and my auntie in Brussels and my auntie in England and my sister and my daughter in America. Across the world, so many people.
Yeah. We sang all the reaching of hands, all the tears, all the crossing of lands. In this pageant we stand. I don't know where I'll go. Should have known by now. If you show me the road back home, well, tell me now how all the words, all the songs that we sang, all the reaching of hands, all the tears, all the crossing of lands. In this pageant we stand, tried our best to make our way in greener fields far away. The only way to cut our cloth is to stay. All the words, all the songs that we sang, all the reaching of hands, all the tears, all the crossing of lands. In this pageant we stand. All the words, all the songs that we sang, all the reaching of hands, all the tears, all the crossing of lands. In this pageant we stand.
Go hauling, hovred, Ryland. So yes, lovely. Thank you so much for sharing all your stories with us.
You're welcome.
It's been really nice listening, and we could go on and on and on, couldn't we? As we always say at the end of every podcast, we could go on and on and on.
Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd yng Nghymru. Thank you very much in Wales. God of Mil y Magwyf. And I'd just like to dedicate this special podcast to my old friend, Dewi Puss Morris.
Dewi Puss, R.I.P. Dewi. Thank you so much for watching and listening to Clancy's Kitchen, the podcast. We've plenty more to come, so listen out for us. Slán go fóil, gur míle maith agaibh, diolch an bhfear. Hi everyone, we really hope you're enjoying watching and listening to Clancy's Kitchen, the podcast. It would help us hugely if you could look into our social media pages, like and subscribe, and likewise on our YouTube channel. We'd really appreciate that. Gurv míle maith agaibh. And please continue watching and listening to Clancy's Kitchen, the podcast. Slán go fóil.